I turned into somebody that I wasn't. I turned into the opposite of who I really was.
Welcome back to Defining Moments. I'm Suzanne Quast. My guest is Khalil Rafati. Thank you so much for being here.
You can change, and you can change in such a profound way that within a period of time, you will not recognize yourself when you look in the mirror. The fact that I'm a convicted felon, the fact that I'm a high school dropout, the fact that I can't spell or type, if this moron can go from this to this, there are no excuses. You can do anything you want.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Defining Moments. I'm Suzanne Quast, and this is a really special episode. My guest story is one of the most inspiring and impactful stories I've ever heard. My guest is Khalil Rafati. Thank you so much for being here. For those of you guys who don't know, Khalil at his lowest point was 109 pounds, emaciated. He had abscesses and sores all over his body. He was living on Skid Row down in downtown Los Angeles, homeless, addicted to heroin, crack, and cocaine. And now he is a super successful entrepreneur, and he owns the company Sun Life Organics, which is a wellness brand that is literally redefining the juice bar space. His story is one of addiction, redemption, and finding a way to deal with the demons that nearly almost took his life. Thank you for being here.
Wow, that was cool.
Yeah.
It was a great intro. I used to be blonde too.
You did, so like
yeah,
me.
I used to be blonde. It wasn't a good look. The blonde with the scabs on my face and the sunken in. Yeah, it wasn't a good look.
No, I could imagine you didn't get a lot of dates.
No.
Not that I'm trying to make light of a really serious situation.
I did not get a lot of dates. I got paid for sex, but that's a whole other.
Oh, no. Okay. Well, now you opened it up.
Are we going to dive right
sex.
in?
I mean, okay. What do you mean you got paid for sex?
I did whatever I had to do to get money for drugs.
Okay.
Yeah, that's in the book. I make a few allusions to it, and then I was told by my friend that helped me edit it, Neil Strauss. He was like, "You got to take all that stuff out. It's too dark. It's too polarizing, and it's just the story already is shocking and dark enough. Mm-hmm. Don't just." So we took a bunch of that out. But I did whatever. I panhandled. I wasn't like a tough guy, or I'm not a tough guy. So like I panhandled and did odd jobs, so to speak.
Yeah, whatever.
And did whatever I had to do to get money for drugs. I mean, that was my life. So.
Well, first of all, this is exactly what my message in life is, and that's to fearlessly own your story. And my God, you're just the epitome of that. And so I look at everything from your book to what you just said to your posts on Instagram to even doing these kinds of shows. And your story is literally changing people's lives. So I just want to thank you. And this is a deeply personal matter for me because I lost my mom to addiction, my brother's in recovery, and I think also what would be helpful is, so we see how you are now, and it might be helpful to understand how you got there and what your childhood was like. Because I heard this woman say she was an addiction specialist, and she said marijuana is not the gateway drug, trauma is. And right?
I like that. I would agree. I would say alcohol is the gateway drug, and it's unfortunate that they don't teach you that in school. There's such an emphasis on drugs, and drugs are bad. And I'm old, so when I was a kid, it was like a fat cop with a dog with a cute name would come in and then show us doctored up films of people on acid jumping off of roofs and dying, and that was supposed to deter us from doing drugs. And as a child that was severely traumatized, I saw that shit and I was like, well, God, I can't wait.
Really?
Oh my God. When they showed me those films when I was a little kid, I thought it was the coolest shit ever. Anything that was gonna shock people or anything that I could use to get attention for myself was something that I wanted to dive straight into. Now, I was scared because I was a little boy. But what ended up happening was I had a beer can collection. There was older kids in the neighborhood. They were sneaking beers and drinking beers. A lot of the beer cans in my beer can collection were full, and so the older kids came over and we cracked open, and I'm talking 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, cracking those open in front of me, drinking them, offering it to me, and the shock value and the attention that I got from them drinking it was one component, but the other component was the moment that alcohol hit my system, I got that like warm, fuzzy feeling. I mean, I was a, probably 60, 70 pound kid. So it didn't take much. Half of a warm beer, half of a can, of warm beer. I was feeling good. And by the time I was like 11, 12 years old, I was sneaking beers on my own. I was going to local liquor stores and lying and telling the people behind the counter that I was buying wine for my mom or for my dad or whatever. Like, alcohol most certainly is a gateway drug. And for me, once I got enough alcohol in me, I got beer muscles. I became tough. I felt like I was tall. I felt like I was good looking. I felt warm, I felt fuzzy, but more importantly, on a biological, if that's even the right word, on a biological level, when you drink alcohol, it freezes your prefrontal cortex, and your prefrontal cortex is where your decision making takes place. So you'll notice, like, dudes will drink and all of a sudden they're on top of the table taking off their clothes, or women as well, or, people hooking up with their girlfriends, their best friend's girlfriend, or shit happens when you're drunk, right? Yeah. Because your inhibitions are frozen because of the alcohol. So I see the alcohol as the biggest problem, and as the biggest gateway, because as soon as I was drunk or messed up, all of a sudden, like, oh yeah, I'll have a puff off of a joint. Right? Why wouldn't I? Yeah. Right? So now I'm taking a puff off a joint as an 11-year-old kid, and all the older cool kids are freaking out, like, oh my God, look how cool that is, or look how crazy that is, or ooh, wow. So that ooh, wow felt good. And to back up a little bit, my dad was gone. My dad left when I was 6, thank God, because my dad was super violent and crazy. And
like, did he hit you violent?
Beat the shit out of my mom constantly. Beat her, not slapped her, beat her.
And you watched and witnessed?
I watched, yeah. I tried to get in between a couple of times. I certainly took my share of beatings, but I don't know. I was a kid. I probably deserved most of those beatings, but my mother never deserved to get hit. No woman ever deserves to get hit. It's just, I can't fathom what kind of horrible shit that he went through. But my father, I'm not defending him, I'm just giving a little background. My father grew up in Palestine, pre-Israel Palestine. Okay. And that Middle Eastern culture back then, I don't know anything about Middle Eastern culture now because I don't know any of my relatives, but back then was a very violent, very misogynistic society. From what I gather when I watch, different news outlets, I hear it still is. Yeah. I don't know, and it's not for me to judge, but my dad was super, super violent. My mother was a weak, codependent, and suffered from depression. And so just a really, really horrible, horrible childhood. There was a lot of sexual abuse. Some of it was from an older sibling from a previous marriage, and that was horrible. He was about 8 years older than me. And just as a small child, witnessing the violence, being sexually molested, and then that became a self-fulfilling prophecy as well. Because once that starts happening, then it's almost like you draw that attention to yourself. So then it started happening with other kids in the neighborhood that were, doing stuff to me. And then ultimately my swim coach was the straw that broke the camel's back. When my swim coach did what he did, and my swim coach was much, much older. I was 11 years old, and that was the most traumatizing thing I'd ever experienced because I looked up to him and I trusted him, and I wanted to be like him. I mean, he was super cool and had a beautiful girlfriend and cool, had a couple of kids and was like 36, 37 years old. And I was a little kid, I was a little boy, took me camping and just did what he did. And it was like the most violating, disgusting. And I shut down. I mean, it wasn't like...
How can you not? And that man, needs to be taken out back and shot. Because, what you did to, he robbed a part of your soul. How do you think the sexual abuse then altered the lens in which you saw the world?
It drastically. The violence and the sexual abuse and the neglect all shaped the way that I saw the world. The world was an ugly place. It was a scary place. It was a place where I wasn't safe. So the moment I could begin acting out with anything, it's not just drugs and alcohol, it was vandalism, it was shoplifting, it was sex at an early age. I started having sex when I was 12 years old, and I mean intercourse sex at 12 years old. And I felt dirty and I felt gross, but I loved the response from the older kids who were like, yeah, man, did you hear, him and so had sex? And like, it started to give me an identity, which I didn't have. So alcohol was the gateway, then the drugs, and then...
I think it's interesting something you said, not to cut you off. I think so often we talk about substances, being addicted to substances. But I think, like you said, we can be addicted to ways of behavior. And that then all of a sudden form and indicate who we are. And that becomes the story in which we tell ourselves. And then the way in which we go into the world and act, even if that's not in alignment with who we want to be. Yeah. Because it's how other people's projections on us are. And that's then how, like, you were getting all this attention. People thought you were cool. You were then escaping, I'm sure, this horrific reality. And so it gave you so many different things. Like, it gave you an identity other than being a victim.
Yeah. I think even a step further, not just I turned into somebody that I wasn't. I turned into the opposite of who I really was. Like, when I look back at that little boy, I loved the little bunnies in the spring, and I loved the sparrows and the finches, and I loved playing in the creek with the minnows and with the crayfish, and I loved listening to the birds. And my favorite movie was The Sound of Music.
Mine too.
Really?
Yes.
So
the hills
yes,
are alive.
yes. I was like a little, I don't know. I was a cute little, like, really super feminine kid. I loved to dress up in my mom's dresses, and I loved to put her makeup on and put her Chanel No. 5 on and dance around. And I was a soft, delicate little flower. And by 13, 14 years old, I was presenting myself to the world as a hardened, tough, criminal, bad guy. Drugs and sex and cheating and selling drugs and vandalism and fighting. I mean, man, I was starting fights. I would start a fight over anything, but I wasn't tough. And I got away with so much because I was so aggressive and so loud and so scary as a little kid that most people were scared. There was a couple of times when it would turn into an actual physical altercation, and thank God I had a little bit of strength and wrestling skills. I'm Polish and Palestinian, so I'm like a fire hydrant. I mean, I did, as much as my dad's a mean old bastard, I do love him, and I am grateful for him. We don't have any type of relationship.
Not even now, not even after the book or anything?
After the book, he never spoke to me again.
Really?
No, that was it. That was
like the nail in the coffin for him. Like, was it a pride thing?
We had never had a relationship ever. Yeah. I mean, it just, he left when I was 6 or 7. My mother was working nights. I was left alone unsupervised, and he went off and worked in Europe, South America for like 8 years. He came back when I was in my mid-teens and tried to be a dad, but but at that point I was hell on wheels. I got kicked out of every school. I got kicked out of St. Patrick's of Heatherdowns. I got kicked out of Maumee Valley Country Day School before the school year even started. I got kicked out of St. John's, and then I dropped out of Bowsher. So I wasn't, no one would have been able to parent me, but especially not my father, who I hated so much, and he hated me.
Yeah.
So no relationship with my dad whatsoever.
And then how do you get out of this? How do you get out of this fiasco? Because you're in Ohio, which I'm from Kentucky, by the way, so not far, so I kind of understand.
Getting into more and more trouble. I had come out here for a day when I was 17 and sort of fell in love with the idea of the girls and the music and acting and all that stuff. So I was very drawn to LA, and I went back and just kept getting into more and more and more trouble with the dream and with the hope that I was going to wind up out here. And at 21 years old, I got blind drunk one night, was screaming at my friends that they were a bunch of fucking losers and that they were going to die in that shitty little town. We were actually up in Detroit that night, and they called me on my shit. They were like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, oh, I'm going to LA. And they're like, bullshit. You've been saying that for 4 years now. And I'm like, oh yeah, but I'm going. And they're like, bullshit. No, you're not. You're never going to go. And I was so drunk and so full of false pride that I screamed at them and said, fuck you, I'm leaving tomorrow. And when I woke up the next morning, I was so hungover and still so full of false pride that I threw my shit in my car and I drove across the country with $800 to my name, a little over $800 to my name. And I wound up out here. And,
now that is a defining moment. That is a moment.
It was a
like I
defining
feel
moment.
like, yeah, people like, you sometimes, it's weird, like life has to make you so uncomfortable in order for you to finally do something.
I could not bear the embarrassment of seeing them again because there was a lot of false promises back then of what I was going to do. I was going to open up a nightclub. I was going to open up a restaurant. I was going to do all these things, and nothing ever panned out for me. I was just always a fucking loser. I could never keep a job. I could never keep a relationship. I really, really struggled. I didn't really have a whole lot of life skills, and that continued on.
Yeah, but then you get to LA, and I have to say, you're like, because when I moved to LA, I had a hustle too. Like, you know, I had dreams, and I was like trying to pursue acting and all this stuff. So I was a bartender, I cocktail waitressed. Your beginning hustle is a little like, it's like a Hollywood story though. It's there's a lot of glamour to it. You started working for big name people. Yeah. Elizabeth Taylor.
Guns N' Roses.
Yeah. Jeff Bridges. Yeah. Like, what the fuck? Like, that's not...
When I look back on it, it seems so crazy to me, but I thought about it, I dreamed about it, I fantasized about it, and then it just happened. I don't know. I mean, like, I went to go, like, sell pot to some guy, and he was like, oh, I'm going up to Axel's, and maybe he'll want some. And I'm like, my heart's, like, racing. I just got here from Ohio, and I'm thinking... There's no way he means Axl. Axl Rose was the biggest rock star in the world at that time and lived in Malibu. And sure enough, this was some guy that knew him. And we went up there, and like the next thing you know, I'm like sitting in the same, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't take a breath. It's so silly now. I mean,
no, but I get it. You're young, and like this is your first experience in LA.
Yeah.
And like these people are gods.
It was nuts. And then someone mentioned like, oh yeah, he, you know, details cars or he washes cars. I mean, he's the pot dealer as well. That probably helped. Yeah. Yeah, Axl / the Jeff Bridges thing. I lived at 212 Entrada in the Santa Monica Canyon, and Jeff lived up on Adelaide, and a guy that was his handyman was my neighbor. And same thing. He was like, yeah, this guy, like, you know, details cars, and, you know, same shit. I went up there with him, and I was washing the car. He didn't tell me. They never tell you. They never say, like, we're going to go to Jeff Bridges' house, or we're going to go to Elizabeth Taylor's. I was up there just, like, washing the car, and this guy came out, and I think it was around the time of the Dude movie or whatever, but I could be wrong. He said, can you give me a hand moving something? And I said, sure. And we went back to his guest house, and we were moving a bunch of stuff. When he said, give him a hand, I didn't, you know, it was like an hour of like moving furniture. However, he was so nice, and I said, God, you look so much like the guy from Against All Odds. And he like looked up at me, and he goes, thank you. He didn't say I am, right? He's like, thank you. And then we were carrying like a sofa or something down the stairs. It was really, really challenging. And I said, is the mother-in-law coming to move in or something like that? And he laughed so hard that he like dropped his end. And he was like, how would you know that? And I'm like, I was joking. And he goes, no, my mother-in-law is coming to stay with us. I'm like, holy shit. And then he's like, listen, man. He never said, by the way, I am Jeff Bridges. He just said, listen, man, when you're done with the car, we have an amazing spa in the back, steam room, swimming pool. There's beers in the fridge. I want you to just help yourself and make yourself comfortable. And, you know, anytime you want to stop by or whatever. And I'm just like, that is so cool. And it wasn't until and I did, you know, it wasn't until the very end when the lady came out and said, who do I make the check out to? And then I said, who is that guy? What does he do? He's so nice. And she's like, you're kidding, right? And I'm like, no. And they're like, she was like, yeah, it's Jeff Bridges. And I'm like, holy shit. And all of those situations at that time were very innocent and very nice. And there was a lot of goodness inside of me at that time that those people were drawn to.
Yeah, of course.
One of my biggest fears today is that I lost touch with that goodness, with that Ohio. Yeah.
No, but being with you, here with you now, this is my first encounter with you, it's there. It
I
is
hope.
so, like, you're so kind and warm and honest and real. Like,
I hope.
no.
I hope. My friends might tell you otherwise.
Well, Nico and I over here can totally, no, I'm serious. Like, wow, you're such a delight.
I went back to Ohio for a funeral for my best friend, one of the kids that protected me back in Ohio, and I hadn't been back. I don't go back. I had such bad memories back there, but I went back for this funeral, and I saw a bunch of people that I hadn't seen in 30 years. And a few of us went to dinner a couple different nights while I was there. And we laughed and we told stories in a way that doesn't happen out here, because out here you have to have your guard up. And out here, people typically want to know you because you know people that they want to know, or because people are interested in upward mobility here. There is no upward mobility where I'm from.
I hear you.
It's just good people. And I didn't have to be cool, because in their eyes I already was cool. And out here I get nervous that I'm not good enough, and I should have done this or I should have done that. And I don't know. Yeah, I came back.
I think that that's probably really normal and really honest to share. I think it's a normal human condition to feel like I'm not enough. And I feel like with the experiences that you've had, you have to work extra hard to remind yourself that
I'm definitely not enough. I'm definitely not where first of all, I'm 5'7".
Yeah. Well, you are enough of it. Like, yeah.
I definitely am not enough in terms of what I could have been or what I should have been, but thank God I'm no longer what I used to be, right?
Yeah.
So there's a component of like, thank God I'm no longer living like a monster and being a piece of shit and being a detriment to society. Thank God I have money to take care of my mom and make sure that she doesn't want for anything, and I get to spoil the shit out of her. Thank God I was able to end my previous relationship with dignity and grace and leave her in a financial place where she's going to be comfortable for a long, long, long time. But no, I'm not enough. There's so much more I can do, and there's so much more I want to do, and there's so much more I will do.
And some of that goodness, I'm curious, when you were in LA, it start to when did the wheels start to come off the bus?
When I began to fuel myself with harder and harder drugs, something switched. Like, it was, I was a pretty happy drunk for the most part, sometimes violent. But when I started to bring in the crack and the heroin and the pills, something changed inside of me. Psychologically, I began to change, and my darkness began to rise up and take over, and the goodness began to fall by the wayside. I mean, there was still some there, because I remember in my worst moments, I still would always try to help someone that was further down than me, or someone that was really down their luck. I talk about that in the book. I think that's from my mom. I get that from my mom, thank God. But yeah, I just became an asshole. I became an asshole.
What was the first time you did heroin? What was that like?
Oh, I mean, it was fucking amazing. Sorry.
No, that's honest.
It felt really good. It felt like God was hugging me. It felt like I was gonna be okay. The first time I shot cocaine, I wasn't 5'7". I felt like I was 6'2" and I could go play for the Lakers. Those drugs gave me chemical courage, and they gave me. I mean, look, again, biologically, if you take those drugs, they're going to unnaturally raise your dopamine and your serotonin levels to the point where you feel like a god. So in the beginning, it was incredible. It's short-lived.
Yeah.
And nothing comes for free.
No.
And sooner or later, it doesn't matter how much I was shoving into my veins, which I can barely see anymore. I used to have these ropey veins everywhere. No matter how much I shot into those veins, there was nothing that was going to make me feel whole and make me feel complete again.
In the book, you mentioned something about when you found out that you did needles with somebody that had HIV.
Mm-hmm. AIDS. He had full-blown AIDS.
He did?
Yeah.
What? Why?
Just was, I didn't care. I didn't care. I got to the point where I didn't care. That's what I'm saying. Like, there was a invisible line that I crossed where there was no coming back from. And I had messed up so many. I don't talk about this in the book, and I don't even like to talk about it really, but I was making music with I talked to him today. I was making music with the kid named Dwayne Betts, amazing guitar player in his own right and songwriter, but also happens to be the son of Dickie Betts, who started the Allman Brothers. And Dwayne and I were making music together, and a guy named Garrett, who goes by the stage name of G Love and Special Sauce. They had heard our demo and they wanted to meet with us. We met with them. They signed us to a management deal. They put up a bunch of money to get us in a recording studio, and they arranged it so we would play Coachella. Now, we weren't signed yet. We had a management deal, but they arranged it so we would be playing Coachella, just a song, but with Garrett. We would have been the only unsigned band to ever play the main stage of Coachella, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And about a week before the event, before the concert, I told my girlfriend that I needed a couple $1,000s to stock up so I would have everything that I needed, and never went to sleep from that day going forward. So by time the day before Coachella came, I had pulled giant chunks out of my scalp with like flesh on the end of them. Jesus. I had taken cuticle clippers and cut into my face and cut this part of my nose off. Yeah, I had lost my mind to such an extent that I thought that bugs were crawling on me. I thought the aliens were with the parasites and the government, and this crazy psychosis set in. I showed up at Coachella with my artist passes and everything. I showed up 5 hours after we were supposed to perform. 5 hours. Whoa. So it's not just that I shared needles with somebody that had AIDS. It was that, you know, remember, I had my SAG card, I had done a couple of commercials, and just fucked all of that off. I had thrown away my music career. I had destroyed, at one point in the mid-90s, Arnold Rifkin, who was a god in Hollywood at that time. Arnold Rifkin was the president and CEO of the William Morris Agency. At one point, he was introducing me at dinner parties like I was the next big thing. He thought that I was like this James Dean type of character that sang and acted and this and that. So I went from that to like, you know, shooting heroin with dirty needles and smoking broken crack pipes, like laying in my own, you know, shit and piss and hanging out with homeless people. And I mean, it was...
How much, like, on a day, because you ended up homeless?
Yeah.
Like, in downtown. How much would you do a day?
Any amount. There was no amount that I couldn't do. There was, when I shouldn't use her name, Jennifer, we'll call her Jennifer from the book. When Jennifer's family finally hired Warren Boyd, who was considered the cleaner, who would go in and extract people to get them away from, you know, psychotic people like myself.
Yeah.
When they finally hired him to get her away from me, they drugged her and they sequestered her. We had pawned all of their family heirlooms all over Los Angeles. And we were paranoid because we had been up for days. So we would do it at a different pawn shop each time. One time it would be a necklace, another time it would be earrings, another time it would be rings, whatever. These are heirlooms that she had inherited. And I went back homeless after she was long gone. And since I used my driver's license and my fingerprints to pawn the stuff, remember, they still owed us the stuff back, or they owed us 50% of their perceived value.
Got it. So you went back.
I would go back and walk out with like $5,000, and they were stoked because they were getting stuff that was really worth 50 grand.
Yeah.
But I would go back armed to the teeth, and I would go on these runs where I had thousands and thousands of dollars, and you would think it would have lasted a month, and 72 hours later, I'd be back to Robertson 7-Eleven out front, 5 o'clock in the morning, you know, just sitting there shaking, coming down. I mean, there was no amount of heroin and cocaine that I could shove into my needle and push into my veins that would satisfy me for a moment. And if I ran out, I would shoot cold water or shoot hot water. I didn't care. And I used dirty needles, and I used, you know, toilet water, puddle water. I didn't care. I didn't care. No, I crossed that invisible line and it was over. And
then, like, where are you sleeping when you're downtown? Are you just on the street? Are you?
Yeah.
And what's the craziest thing you saw downtown?
Things that I talked about it a little bit in the book, but things that to this day, I'll never know if they were real. There would be times late, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, and again, I had been up for days, and I'm shooting massive amounts of cocaine and smoking crack and picking cigarette butts off the ground and smoking them. I would see things that I hope weren't real. I would see demons, and I would be attacked by demons, and I would have people shapeshift on me and turn into a demon or some sort of demonic thing from a few days earlier. I saw people that seemed normal that would all of a sudden get some crack into them, and they would snap, and they would turn into just monsters, and start doing weird things, weird sexual things. Men that seemed, not that being gay is not normal, but men that seemed like heterosexual men would start smoking crack and would all of a sudden get gay and want to do weird stuff. I saw a lot of stuff. I saw a lot of weird stuff, and I experienced a lot of weird stuff. And I definitely, I sincerely hope that some of that crazy, demonic, weird shit where I was attacked and scratched and all that stuff, I hope it was psychosis. I hope it's not real, because
Or it is, and you just got that close with the dark side and like the kiss of death.
But you know what that means? That means that those people that are still down there are contending with that, and that's why I hope it's not real. It's not about me. I can handle anything. The shit that I've been put through, there's nothing that I couldn't handle at this point, right? I hope that stuff's not real. I hope that was just watching too many scary movies when I was a kid, because it was dark, dark, twisted shit.
How, after everything that you've seen, 2 questions. After everything you've seen, do you have faith in humanity?
People are good. We're born good. I can't remember what the quote is, but every child has God inside of them. And it's only when we try to teach them and discipline them and force them to turn into something that they don't want to turn into. I've had so many people offer up so much generosity and kindness towards me and love me, that I just feel like people are really, really good. I think women in general are much better than men. And I think that comes down to biology again. I think it comes down to, testosterone makes men do some shit that's not so savory. I mean, it's a very aggressive hormone, and it can be murderous, and it can be overly lustful, and it can make men do really stupid shit. Women seem to have much more of a maternal, wise, loving nature about them, and men just seem to be just fucking idiots for the most part. Sorry. And I'm one of them.
I will take it.
I'm one of them. I'm not, so I don't mean you guys. I mean us guys. I think we're just fucking stupid and ego driven, and I think it's fear. It's fear of death. It's fear of inadequacy, fear of not being good enough. And then women just kind of have this like godlike repose about them, and there's a reason for that, because women are the gods. Women are the ones with the ability to create life within themselves. That's a god.
I like this, Khalil.
That's reality.
Yeah.
That's reality.
I mean, you're right. Speaking of like gods and all of that, I'm curious, because my brother says this, in his times he's been declared dead, and, he's overdosed more times than I can probably count. But he says that he feels like, and he knows that he had guardian angels looking over him at times.
Yeah.
Do you feel the same way?
Sure, for sure.
People who brought you back, or
not just when I was overdosed and flatlined. No, right now, right here, right now. I mean, here I am. This is amazing. I was a real piece of shit. My life sucked. And now I get to offer people hope, and I get messages every day. It's usually not from drug addicts. Today it actually was from a young woman that just celebrated 8 years, or is about to celebrate 8 years, and she just said, "Thank you for recovering in front of us, because it gave me so much hope." And I was like, wow, that's fucking awesome. Like, what What an amazing thing to say. And like this book, you know, putting that ugly ass picture of myself on there, I'm going to speak for myself for a moment. What I do with this little thing, right, with this $1,700 device made by children in a third world country,
What put it like that?
what I do with this is I try to pretend like I'm amazing and I'm beautiful and I'm famous and I'm rich, and I take these filtered pictures of myself and I put them on Instagram or I'm old enough to say Facebook, but I put them on there in a way where I present myself in a way that's not real. This is not real. Social media is not real. Social media is like self-imposed paparazzi pics, right? It's not real. That's not my real life. If you go on my Instagram, and I've said it 10,000 times, these are not my private jets. These are not my penthouses. This is not my vacation. I get invited on shit like that. Fuck yeah, I'm gonna go. Are you kidding me? If you invited me to the opening of a refrigerator, if there's a private jet involved, I'm going. I'm that shallow, I'm that insecure, right? But it's not real. That's not my real life. My real life, I get up in the morning and I clean out my cat's litter box. And until I can get a half a cup of coffee into my stomach and sort of override that anxiousness, and until I can eventually get down to the beach and take a walk on the beach and do some breathing exercises and breathe deeply into my chest and breathe out my mouth, and breathe in the negative ions and feel that on my skin, the sunlight on my skin, and maybe it's a little bit of yoga, maybe it's getting in the ocean, maybe it's sauna. There's a multitude of tools that I use today to try to resemble a normal human being that is not a few sentences away from killing myself, right?
Do you feel like that on a regular basis, like that you could kill yourself?
Sure,
or that, like,
of course.
And do you miss heroin ever?
No, I don't. The only time I miss heroin or drugs is like right now my shoulder really hurts. Like it'd be nice to, you know, like a normal person, if I could take a handful of Percocet and not feel the sharp stabbing pain in my shoulder. Mm-hmm. And by the way, a normal person.
I was just
would
gonna
take
say,
a handful of Percocet. Sorry, as I said it, I'm like, wait.
Say something. Don't worry.
Yeah. So could I kill myself? Of course. On a scale of 1 to 10, I would say I'm probably at a 4 to a 6 at any given day. But I don't think that's weird. I think it's just honest. And I think if most people really truly had a hard look in the mirror and really came to peace with where they were at, this is scary.
But I hear what you're saying about, you know, your parents, you love your dad and you love your mom and you forgive them. Like, I look at some of the stuff my mom did, and growing up with an addict was very difficult. Like, I mean, it's like bananas, the things that you see.
Yeah.
And she said to me at one point, she goes, you know, Suzanne, she had a really terrible mother. And she said, my mother told me at one point I did the best I could. And she goes, I didn't understand it until now. And she's like, and I'm telling you, I did the best I could.
Yeah.
And my best wasn't good enough. And like, I think that
that's amazing.
Right?
That's amazing that you got that. I never got that.
I know. And I feel like, you know, we get to a point where we look at our parents as people, not as our parents.
Yeah.
And the empathy that you have for them, I think is really remarkable considering everything that, you know, you went through. And I just want to like acknowledge that.
Thank you.
See that. And because that's hard. But we get to a point where we're like, okay, parents, like, you're kind of fucked up.
Yeah.
But I love you anyways.
I remember when I was like 25, 26, we hadn't spoken in years, and I had called him because I had heard that he wanted to speak to me. And we were getting off the phone. I said, okay, I love you. And he goes, okay. And I said, can you say it back? And he said, what? And I said, can you say I love you too? And he says, I just did. And I said, no, you didn't. And he said, okay, goodbye. And like eventually I got him, because I henpecked him to death. I got him to say it to me. It would have been nice at some point to just hear it once sincerely. It would have been nice at some point, rather than him, when I flew him out here and bought him a new wardrobe and took him to Mexico, took him to Jordan, took him to Vegas, took him wherever. Would have been nice at one point, instead of looking at the line out the door at my business and saying, I should have moved here 20 goddamn years ago. It would have been nice at one point if he could have just looked at me and said, son, you did amazing. I'm really proud of you and I love you. Just once. I was a tough kid. I probably deserved those beatings. I deserved the beatings, not my mother. That part is fucked up. And
yeah, I still could say you could maybe deserve a spanking or two, but like to say you deserve beatings, I don't think any child deserves to get literally beat up. I mean, that's.
But here's the weird thing, and I don't disagree with you. I'm not telling people that they should beat their children, but for God's sakes, whatever they did with this last generation, where they just told them when they came in 8th place that they were amazing and they were going to grow up to be president. You guys gave them all that false hope, and now you see them falling apart, and now all they want to do is be an Instagram model and sell detox tea, by showing their butt in a bikini. Like, gotta toughen them up a little bit.
I'm with you.
Okay.
I am with you on
okay. that. A lot of dysfunction out there from a lack of discipline.
Agreed. Okay, speaking of the success that you've had, I have a question from somebody. They said this. Okay, I'm coming. I would like to know what advice you would give to someone newly sober, has a bad criminal record, ruined his credit, but wants to be successful. Like, what are the first steps to try to resurrect one's career?
Wow. I mean, that's right out of my book. My credit score was a 430 in my second year of recovery. I couldn't get a bank account because I had written so many bad checks. And as a convicted felon, I couldn't really get any jobs other than working in a treatment center. So my advice to that person from my personal experience is take a deep breath and forgive yourself and realize it's okay. There are a lot of people out there, believe it or not, that are in far worse circumstances than you are right now that are going to become massively successful. And that's just a fact. However, you have to give yourself permission to dream again. I was 35, 36 when I started to give myself permission to dream again. You got to allow yourself that, because if you don't allow yourself that, you're going to stay stuck in that paycheck to paycheck mentality. Allow yourself to dream again. Reach out for a little bit of some sort of vocational training. For me, it was becoming an interventionist and a sober companion and a counselor. So you can get your KDAC, you can get your intervention. The intervention thing took like 2 weeks, but I was good at it, and it was another source of income. I washed dogs and washed cars and walked dogs and cleaned people's apartments. So, and that was well into my mid-30s. I was a manny for Billy, Bob, and Pietra, for their two boys, Willie and Harry.
That's very cool.
I taught them how to boogie board every day. Nothing is beneath me for work. So if you develop a mentality where nothing is beneath you and you're willing to work super hard, then and people will see you working really hard, then doors will begin to open. Because someone asked me the other day, well, like, is your success because a bunch of rich people helped you and gave you money? It's part of it. But those people saw me cleaning apartments, washing dogs, cleaning cars, going to their mansions, cleaning up their dog shit in front of them with a big smile on my face, because I was stoked to be able to get paid money to clean up somebody's dog shit. Didn't really seem like that much work. I mean, Lou Gossett Jr. gave me a job taking care of his 2 black labs. I wasn't a dog person at the time, but they made me a dog person. I ended up falling in love with these 2 dogs, and they didn't care if I had cologne on. They didn't care if I smelled funny. They didn't care if I had brushed my teeth that morning. These dogs loved me. And I learned through interacting with these dogs and cleaning up their poop and filling up their kibble and taking them on these hikes, or I think they were taking me on hikes, actually. I learned some valuable lessons from those dogs. So just cut yourself some slack, forgive yourself, and know that if you put the effort in, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, is going to reward you and doors are going to open for you. It's not going to happen overnight.
Right? Let's say you're going through a divorce and your credit sucks and you don't know what you're going to do. You don't know how you're going to survive, or you go through a breakup, or you get fired from your job. I think that's practical tools.
Get off social media, that's for sure. If social media existed back then, I'd be making probably $12 an hour still, $10, $12 an hour still. I'm certain of it.
Because you would be trying to keep up with the Joneses, or because
It's a sickness. This is a sickness. It's not. There's nothing good about it. I mean, it's good in the sense that you and I got connected, so I like it for that. And Ben Greenfield and what's her name, the hot Lauren, the Skinny Confidential, like people like that were able to get access to me, and I was able to get access to them. So there is like 10% of social media is good, but 90% of social media, it's voyeurism. It's humble bragging. It's sick. It's a sickness.
Well, it's an addiction.
It's an addiction.
How many times are you just throughout the day just randomly pulling up Instagram? You're not even, and so I have to go through periods where I just delete it.
It's bad news, and it will rob you of your soul, just like drugs and alcohol will. It will rob you of your soul. If you're struggling, get off social media. I got 14 shops now. I got a yoga studio. I got a best-selling book out. I got into halfway decent shape. So for me to throw a shirtless pic of myself on Instagram and get 1,000 likes, I don't know, not like some great heroic act. It's a pretty egoic, sad, silly thing that a grown man is doing that. However, I earned it, right? I'm here. I'm okay. But if I had to go to my second job right now and go wait tables or go do whatever, which a lot of people in this town are doing, and I'm on Instagram, I'm going to be green with envy. Shit, I'm green with envy as it is, and I'm rich.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or if I'm not in great shape, or like the shape that I want to be in, or if I'm not living where I want to live, like I live at the beach. I own my own business. I got a good life. So for me to dick around on social media, I can somewhat justify it, even though it's disgusting, and even though it's not real and it's not the life that, how come I'm not posting Insta stories of me cleaning the shit out of my cat's litter box?
I think you should. I think that this is now what you're going to do, and you're going to tag me, and we're going to say,
I'll do it. I don't care. I mean, just get off social media and go to work.
Okay, let's end on this. If you could define the legacy you want to leave behind in a couple of words, what would it be?
That you can change, that you can change, and you can change in such a profound way that within a period of time, you will not recognize yourself when you look in the mirror. You can do anything, you can be anything, you can accomplish anything. There are no limitations. The only limitations that you're going to place upon yourself, and the story and the shock value of not just the picture on the book, but the mug shots inside of the book, and the story and the different arrests, and the fact that I'm a convicted felon, the fact that I'm a high school dropout, the fact that I can't spell or type, but I got a best-selling book. Like, think about that, guys. I can't spell and I can't type, and that's not feigned humility. There are days when I struggle to which shoe to put on, right? That's reality. I'm not that smart. I'm not that bright. It's okay, because I'm passionate and I'm hungry, right? So if this moron can go from this to this, there are no excuses. You can do anything you want. So go do it. That's my legacy.
Oh my God, I love it. Thank you guys. Thank you. Like, honestly, your story, and I know I've probably stalked you, but it's so impactful, and I believe in it so much, and I know it's changing people's lives, and I really, really, really appreciate your time here today.
Thanks for listening, guys.
So yeah, and please forward this on to anybody you think is in a rut, facing addiction, and ready for a new life.
Yeah. Go get them.